In a quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio, the Reynolds white two-story house was the only one with its living room lights still on among the neat row of homes. The clock showed 10 p.m. "Michael, it's bedtime," Patty gently opened the door to her son's room. 8-year-old Michael was still at his desk, reading. His profile in the moonlight was strikingly similar to his father's. "Just 5 more minutes," Michael smiled at his mother. His expression had a gentleness unusual for children his age. On his desk were neatly arranged textbooks and an astronomy book borrowed from the library. He was already halfway through it. "You have school tomorrow. Let's finish up for today," Patty spoke to her son with gentle firmness. At 33, she worked 4 days a week at an accounting firm while raising her son alone after divorcing 6 years ago. Well, not alone anymore. Richard, her partner of 4 years, had become part of their new family. Richard Reynolds, 39, had a 10-year career as a sales director at a real estate development company. Standing at 5 feet 11 inches with a well-maintained build, he was always polite and well-regarded in the neighborhood. Most importantly, his good relationship with Michael gave Patty peace of mind. "Is Dad not home yet?" Michael asked while closing his book. "He called to say he'd be late. Seems busy with a new project," Patty answered, gently stroking her son's head. Richard could set his own schedule and usually made it home for dinner. Lately, though, he'd been coming home late more often, citing work commitments. As she watched Michael get into bed, Patty remembered their meeting 4 years ago. At a mutual friend's wedding, she met Richard and was drawn to his sincere personality and kindness toward Michael. After dating for a year, they married. Since then, they'd lived peacefully in this quiet neighborhood. Weekends were filled with family picnics and movie outings. They were financially stable and maintained good relationships with neighbors. Her accounting job, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., allowed her to be attentive to her son's school life. Michael was in 3rd grade. Smart and thoughtful, he particularly loved reading. Though not athletic, his inherent determination drove him to overcome his weaknesses. While he didn't have many friends, he had 2 he could call best friends. Back in her bedroom, Patty carefully hung up her work suit. Her simple, neat appearance earned her clients' trust. The clock had passed 11 p.m. Still no word from Richard. Usually, by this time, the whole family would be asleep. But tonight, something felt off. Patty couldn't quite place what it was. She turned off the living room lights and returned to her room upstairs. Lying in bed, she thought about tomorrow's parent observation day at school. Richard had promised to come. She closed her eyes, hoping he'd come home early enough for them to have dinner as a family. However, she didn't yet know that this peaceful daily life was about to be severely shaken. At 1:15 a.m., Patty lay staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Beside her was Richard's empty bed space. Only the low hum of the air conditioner broke the silence. Lately, her husband had been acting strange. He'd step away for phone calls, and his late returns home had increased. She tried to convince herself it was just work, but something nagged at her. Tonight, another late return without contact. Her messages remained unread. Then, she heard a faint sound. Light footsteps descending the stairs. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But someone was definitely moving. Light steps, but unmistakably human. Patty listened intently. The sound of her son's door opening. Footsteps going down the stairs, one step at a time. Could it be sleepwalking? The thought crossed her mind. Michael had never sleepwalked before, but he had been acting strange lately. He'd grown quieter during dinner and occasionally showed vacant expressions. She worried he might be getting bullied at school. Patty got up and left her room. Moonlight filtering into the hallway cast a pale blue light on the space. Family photos on the wall cast eerie shadows in the moonlight. "Michael?" she called softly while peeking into his room. The bed was empty. The comforter was neatly folded. On the pillow remained the impression of the small head that had been there moments ago. The astronomy book on his desk still had its bookmark. Next to it lay a note about his promise with Richard. "Tomorrow is observation day. Promise with Dad." Her heart began to race. Downstairs, the door to the backyard was slightly open. Night air flowed in, gently moving the lace curtains. In the kitchen, dishes from dinner cleanup were neatly arranged on the counter. Everything seemed normal, yet something felt wrong. Patty quickly put on her slippers and headed for the door. Then, she heard a faint sound from the backyard. The sound of digging. A shovel piercing the ground, scooping up soil. An irregular rhythm, but somehow desperate. She gently moved the curtain aside and peered through the glass. In the moonlit backyard, a small shadow was moving. At the corner of the garden, where Richard had been working last week. Where he said he'd plant tulip bulbs. Michael gripped the shovel with both hands, desperately digging. His back, illuminated by moonlight, looked unusually small. His pajama-clad shoulders trembled. Though his hands were hidden in darkness, only the sound of the shovel turning over soil cut through the night stillness. Richard's gardening shovel, something Michael would never normally touch. He gripped it desperately with his small hands. Patty began to tremble. Why was her son digging in the garden in the middle of the night? What was he looking for? Or was he trying to hide something? She quietly opened the door and stepped into the backyard. The damp night air brushed her cheeks. Despite the humid early August night, a chill ran down her spine. Above, the full moon cast an eerie glow. All windows in neighboring houses were dark. The residential area was as silent as another world. Michael's figure became clearer. Her son's hands were shaking. His small fingers gripping the shovel glowed white. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his pajama sleeves were dirty with soil. He looked nothing like the boy who had been eagerly reading at the library earlier that day. Something unnatural, like fabric, peeked out from the soil. Even in the darkness, she could tell it was unfamiliar material. "Michael, what are you doing?" Patty's voice trembled beyond her control. Her son turned slowly. His face in the moonlight showed traces of tears. Under his eyes were tired blue shadows. An expression as if he'd been suffering from something for days, even weeks. "Mom." A trembling voice. "Dad." Those words seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. As if desperately trying to suppress something that was about to escape his throat. Michael began digging again, more desperately now. As his small hands parted the soil, something else appeared beneath the fabric. In the moonlit ground, things that shouldn't be seen began to emerge one after another. Patty gasped. A blood-stained work outfit. The navy blue coveralls Richard occasionally wore. But she'd never seen them this dirty. A cracked cell phone. One she recognized. The old model he said he'd replaced last week. Tools like wrenches and pliers. Things usually kept in the garage. They cast sinister shadows in the moonlight. All familiar items, but in this context, they looked like weapons. "Stop!" Patty called out to her son in a trembling voice. But Michael continued digging as if he hadn't heard, his small back showing a determination she'd never seen before. A desperate need to protect something, and simultaneously, a longing to be freed from something. Her vision swayed. Her trembling hand reached for her phone. Her face reflected in the screen glowed pale in the moonlight. Before dialing the police, Patty looked at her son's profile once more. His expression in the moonlight bore a deep sadness unfitting for an 8-year-old. Their peaceful days seemed like a lie now. "It's okay now, Michael," Patty whispered quietly while pressing the numbers with trembling fingers. Just thinking about the burden her son had been carrying made her heart ache. "Mom will protect you properly." The operator's voice echoed on the other end. But to Patty's ears, only the sound of her son digging seemed unnaturally loud. Under the moonlight, the shadows of mother and son stretched long, melting into the night garden. Tomorrow's observation day might never come. At 2 a.m., 2 police cars quietly parked in front of the Reynolds house. The headlights went out, and 4 officers stepped out. Perhaps noticing the sound, lights came on in the second floor of the house across the street. Through lace curtains, someone's shadow moved. "Mrs. Reynolds." The lead female officer quietly addressed Patty. "Sergeant Kelly." Mid-40s, perhaps. Sharp observational eyes shone beneath her warm expression. "Yes." Patty answered in a trembling voice. Michael stood behind his mother, as if hiding. His pajamas were dirty with soil, and his small hands still gripped the shovel. "First, let's take the shovel from your son." Sergeant Kelly gently approached Michael and carefully took the shovel. She sealed it in a bag as evidence. Other officers had already headed to the backyard. Flashlight beams cut through the night darkness. "Is it around here?" Another officer pointed to the dug area. The ground showed traces of Michael's desperate digging. The blood-stained work clothes were clearly visible in the moonlight and flashlight beams. "Let's call forensics." The radio quietly crackled. Lights in neighboring houses began turning on one after another, as residents noticed the midnight disturbance. The usually quiet residential area seemed to be slowly waking up. "Mrs. Reynolds, could you wait inside with your son?" Led by Sergeant Kelly, Patty entered the living room with her son. The earlier silence now seemed like a lie. Patty sat on the sofa, holding her son. "Michael, don't be scared." Her son's body trembled slightly. Something he'd been suppressing for days, no, weeks, seemed about to overflow. Sergeant Kelly quietly began. "Your husband. He said he'd be late, work." Her own voice seemed to echo from far away. "Then, could we talk separately?" Another female officer appeared, looking toward Michael. Detective Castro. Early 30s. Her kind smile was striking. "Michael, would it be okay to talk in a different room from your mother?" Michael looked up at his mother for a moment. Patty nodded slightly. "It's okay. Mom will be right here." Led by Detective Castro, Michael went upstairs. His back looked smaller than ever before. "Now then, Mrs. Reynolds." Sergeant Kelly sat across from her. Steam rose quietly from the tea. Could you tell us everything from the beginning? The clock showed 3 a.m. The sound of the forensics team arriving could be heard outside. In the backyard, they had begun photographing the unearthed evidence. Flash photography occasionally lit up the windows. I noticed around 1:15 a.m. Patty began speaking in a trembling voice. Footsteps down the stairs. The empty bed. Her son in the backyard. All memories returned like a nightmare. Sergeant Kelly listened intently to the story, occasionally taking notes. Her gaze held something more than just taking a statement. Perhaps maternal intuition. This officer seemed to have already sensed something. From upstairs came faint sounds of her son's voice. Led by Detective Castro's gentle voice, he seemed to be slowly beginning to talk about the events of that night. And your relationship with your husband? At the sudden question, Patty momentarily stumbled over her words. Normal. I mean, he's dedicated to his work. As she spoke, recent uncomfortable feelings resurfaced. Late returns home. Unnatural phone responses. Changes in her son's behavior. Everything was starting to connect now. Actually. Just as she began to speak, the doorbell rang. Sergeant Kelly stood up. Simultaneously, footsteps ran down from upstairs. Dad's home. Michael's voice rang out like a scream. In that moment, all time seemed to stop. Richard stood at the entrance. In his business suit, his usual dashing demeanor. However, his expression showed unfamiliar tension. What's all this? Richard's voice echoed in the quiet living room. At that moment, seeing Michael coming down from upstairs, his expression momentarily froze. Michael. At the sound of Richard's voice, Michael's body stiffened. Detective Castro instinctively pulled Michael close. Sergeant Kelly quietly stood between them and Richard. Mr. Reynolds, you'll need to come with us to the police station. Her voice was calm but carried weight. The blood drained from Richard's face. Yet he still tried to maintain a smile. There must be some mistake. I just got back from work. Could you tell us about Amanda Walker? At Sergeant Kelly's words, Richard's expression momentarily contorted. Upon hearing that name, Michael's body began to shake. Detective Castro gently embraced him. Amanda. Patty's voice trembled. That name was familiar. A young female employee at her husband's company. A new hire in the sales department. Mom. Michael's voice broke the midnight silence. I can't hide it anymore. His voice carried a weight that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. That day, I came home early from school. Michael's confession slowly began. It happened 3 weeks ago in the afternoon. Michael had returned home an hour earlier than usual. After accompanying an ill classmate to the nurse's office, his teacher had suggested he go home early. Opening the front door, he found unfamiliar women's shoes. Then, his father's voice from upstairs. As he quietly climbed the stairs. I told you. At this rate, I'll. A young woman's voice. Leaking from his father's study. Be quiet. My wife and son know nothing. I'll handle it. His father's low voice. The usually kind voice sounded like a different person. Michael peeked through the door gap. His father was gripping a young woman tightly. Tears streamed down her face. On the desk, what looked like an ultrasound photo. It's already been 3 months. There's no way to keep hiding it. That's why I said, an abortion. No. I have the right to have this child too. At that moment, Michael's phone rang. A message from his mother. The ringtone echoing in the hallway silenced both voices. Michael rushed down the stairs. Footsteps followed behind him. Michael. His father, who had chased him to the backyard, grabbed his arm. Don't tell Mom about this. Understand? The usual kind smile was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar adult expression. But, lying is. Do you want to make Mom sad? Do you want to destroy this family? His father's large hands gripped his trembling shoulders. Promise me. Don't tell anyone. From that day, Michael's nightmare began. And after that, Sergeant Kelly gently prompted. That day. Dad. Michael's voice broke. Detective Castro gently rubbed his back. Amanda came to the house. When Mom was at work. In a trembling voice, Michael continued. While doing homework upstairs, he heard noise from below. A woman's angry voice. His father's low voice. And then. From the stairs, she fell. Michael, who had come down the stairs startled by the sudden noise. There was Amanda, motionless at the bottom of the stairs. And his father, standing there dumbfounded. It was an accident. His father's trembling voice. No one will believe me. Blood-stained work clothes. His father rushing to dispose of them. And a shallow hole dug in the backyard. Michael, help me. This is our secret. An 8-year-old child covering with soil with trembling hands. Sneaking out to the garden every night to check if rain had washed away the soil. And all these memories becoming a burden. I couldn't take it anymore. By the time Michael's confession ended, dawn was breaking. Patty held her son tightly. Such pressure on such a small body. As a mother, regret squeezed her heart for not noticing sooner. Sergeant Kelly's voice echoed gently. You don't have to hide anything anymore. Outside the window, Richard Reynolds was quietly being handcuffed. In his suit, he looked unusually small, like a different person entirely. As the sun began to rise, police sirens quietly rang out. Curious eyes peered from neighboring windows, as if realizing that yesterday's peaceful daily life would never return. Hey, Mom, Michael whispered softly after the police car drove away. We can't go to observation day today, can we? At those words, tears spilled from Patty's eyes. In the police-surrounded morning garden, the mother held her son tightly once again. The days ahead would certainly not be easy. But they no longer needed to lie. A small son who found the courage to tell the truth, and a mother who accepted it. The new sunrise gently enveloped them both. 3 months had passed. The residential area on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio, already showed signs of winter. Patty gazed out the window while organizing old photo albums. In the backyard, newly planted flowers swayed in the cold wind. Mom, I'm going to the library, Michael called from the entrance. He seemed to have grown a little taller than before. Be careful, his mother called out as she saw him off. Her son turned back and smiled. That smile seemed to be gradually releasing itself from the pressure of that night. On the weekend, they planned to look at a new house together. Though it would be sad to leave this house full of memories, it was also part of a new beginning. A small step, but a sure one. Mother and son gazed at each other, quietly exchanging smiles. The morning sun gently illuminated their profiles.